Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. This vlog is about how you can use a very simple NLP tool to both silence the voice in your head, or at least largely silence the voice in your head, and also to become a far better communicator by learning to evoke specific, clear information from the people that you are speaking with. So this particular simple tool is from neurolinguistic programming. Now, to say a couple of things about neurolinguistic programming before we get into how to silence the voice in your head and how to communicate better with people by evoking quality, clear information. To me, neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, is about the study of subjective experience, meaning how we human beings construct our own experience moment to moment. NLP to me is a methodology um, that's about how to explore that, how we construct our own experience. Now, there are a few things about neurolinguistic programming that are very strong and that contribute a lot to humanity. I think the world would be a much better place if more people had quality NLP training. Now, some of these strengths is NLP really emphasizes how the map is not the territory. Now, this essentially means that in the same way that we could build a map um, about how to navigate a city, no matter how useful or functional or dysfunctional or not useful the map might be, the map will never become the city. Or in the same way that you could step into a restaurant, and if you step into a restaurant, hopefully they'll give you a menu. The menu can help. It can help you navigate the restaurant, so to speak, to discover what you want to eat and what the kitchen can actually offer. But again, no matter how much you work on the menu will never become the food. In the same way, our brain-based simulation of life, our thought-generated reality, so to speak, um, is always a map. It's a map of people and objects and situations, so to speak, but it will always be a map. Now, why is this important? Well, it seems like the default for us human beings largely is to operate as what many philosophers call naive realists, meaning that we often have the perception that we essentially see the world as it is. This is also often called myth of the given, meaning that there's a fixed world that I'm just observing. I'm the subject in here and the world is out there and I just perceive it as it is. Now, if I truly believe that, or if I often operate from that assumption, let's say that somebody thinks very differently from me. This is likely to be disturbing to me because if I see the world as it is and you don't see it, well, best case scenario, you're just misinformed. If I could just sit you down and have a conversation with you, if you're an honest, decent human being, you'll be able to grasp how things really are. Um, but it's also very easy for me to project onto you that you're just plain stupid or evil or unethical. And you can see this very often in whether it's political discussions or discussions on social media, how quickly people attribute those motives to each other. How easily people label those who think differently as evil, stupid, dishonest. Now, some of these people might be pretty stupid or evil or dishonest, meaning that those labels may or may not be useful maps in terms of, another human being, but one key factor in us doing this so often is because if you operate as a naive realist, that's how you'll construct your experience. That's how you'll easily construct the experience of other people. Having more of a embodied understanding that the map is not the territory will give you perceptual freedom. It will give you an increased ability for perspective taking. It will give you more choice in constructing your own experience of yourself and people and situations in new and updated ways. So in my view, NLP really is the study of this. Another main strength of NLP is to focus on process. You know, often people will come in and say stuff like, I suffer from depression, or I have social anxiety, or our relationship sucks, my marriage sucks. And I'll very often respond back to them, how are you relating in a sucky way? Or how are you depressing? Or how are you relating to life in a depressive way? Or, how do you phobic? And often people chuckle a bit when I and other NLP-oriented folks do this, because, so what do you mean, how am I phobicking? Or how am I relating in a depressing way? But depression really is processes of depressing. Relationship is not a thing. It's not something that you can drive around in a wheelbarrow. It's a process of relating. So thinking of what we call ourselves and human beings and relationships and states of mind as live processes is a lot more accurate than thinking of it as static entities or things. And it also provides more choice. This is another strength in neurolinguistic programming. It has a tendency to emphasize this. Now, if you combine these 2 points, that what we think of as things really are processes, with the fact, and this is a psychological fact, that the map is not the territory, then you're likely to become a better communicator. Because here's the thing. The person who's listening is as active a participant as the one who's talking. Hearing is a verb. Hearing is the activity of hearing. It's not just a passive experience of detecting differences in air pressure out there. It's a constructed experience. That's why you have typical questions like if a tree falls in the wood and there's no one there to hear it, does it still make a sound? Scientifically, the answer is no, because sound is a construct. Yes, out there, in the world, in the territory, so to speak, there are changes in air pressure. But for there to be an experience of sound and tree falling, you need a brain to create a simulation of what's going on out there. So there's often a huge difference between what you might be saying and what another person might be hearing. And very often, since people so often operate strongly as naive realists, this isn't even on their radar. It might not even be on their radar that what they're hearing may have no resemblance to what the other person is saying or intending to communicate with his words. NLP training quality NLP training, quality NLP skills, in my experience and in my opinion, helps people become better at acknowledging and appreciating that, wait a minute, what I'm hearing here might not have that much to do with what the other person is saying. So let me check in. Because if you don't check in, you have two people having different monologues. There's not even a conversation going on. It's just people talking about two very different things while they're having the illusion that some sort of communication is taking place. So the particular, I'll give you a fun example of this. Just recently, I posted a Facebook post because I had seen the word Islamophobia being used on quite a few threads recently. So I wrote that Islamophobia is the attempt to medicalize those who object to and disagree with the political religious ideology of Islam. And I further wrote that to attempt to diagnose disagreement and dissent and critique of an ideology as disease is bad ethics and dishonesty on steroids. Now, one guy actually wrote, in all sincerity, as a response to this, if you want to nuke the Muslim world, why don't you have the balls to say so? So I'm talking about the use of psychiatric labeling to stigmatize and to oppress speech. Someone else's hears that I want to nuke the Muslim world. There's no resemblance here whatsoever. In the same way that, sometimes when people might critique something like Islam, a religious political ideology, some people hear hatred of Muslims, or they hear racism or bigotry, and something like that, and then they might begin to talk to you as if your motives are racist or hateful. So this completely screws up any communication, because what people then criticize has nothing to do with what you're actually communicating. Now, I suspect that for a lot of people, operating as naive realists and not being good at making map territory distinctions, really have no awareness that what they're hearing might have little resemblance between what you're saying. And of course, then you have other people whose sense of ethics, in my opinion, are so low. They might know that you're not, a racist. They might know that you're not hating, individuals, but they don't care. They'll just project it onto you because they know if they can label you as racist, they've won the debate, because a lot of people haven't, necessarily read that well anyways. So that's a different problem. It's in my estimate, actually worse. So okay, let's talk first about how to evoke quality information, how to evoke clarity from another human being. The tool I'm going to share with you is called the verbal package. It's a kind of abbreviated version of the old NLP meta model. Here, I've gotten it from John Grinder, and it essentially helps you to do two things. It helps you to reduce your own mind reading, your own projecting of meaning, your own hearing stuff that's not necessarily said, and it helps the other person to connect their language to the kind of sensory experiences that the language was originally connected to. So I'll give you two examples of this, one from my clinical practice, one from my personal life. It essentially entails asking two questions. Which specifically for nouns, and how specifically for verbs. Now, nouns are words that identifies, people, places, processes, and things and ideas. Verbs are action words, so they always refer to some sort of action, an occurrence, a state of being. So knowing is a process, an action in a sense. Running is an action. So which specifically for nouns, how specifically for verbs? So quite a few years ago, I had a school teacher come in, very depressed, very frustrated, and she said, my life is a nightmare. It's just all hopeless. My life is a nightmare. So I said to her, which life? And she kind of got semi-offended, semi-chuckling, and she was like, what do you mean, what life? Which life? I said, well, I'm not implying that you don't have a life. I'm asking which life, as in which contexts of life. She said, oh yeah, it's my life as a school teacher. So already here we've gone from life completely sucks, life is hopeless, to my life as a school teacher sucks. So I said to her, okay, which parts of life as a school teacher specifically? She said, what do you mean? Is it the meetings with the parents? Is it teaching certain subjects? Is it? She said, no, it's class 5B. So when do you see class 5B? Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we've gone from life sucks and is hopeless to class 5B on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Which part of 5B specifically? I'll use English names for this. So Tom and John. So Tom and John in class 5B on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Yeah. Well, now we kind of have a context. She said, they drive me nuts. So I said to her, well, they can't. You have to do that yourself. So with Tom, how specifically do you drive yourself nuts? Because driving yourself nuts is an activity. So how specifically do you drive yourself nuts? And I discovered that this particular kid, he had this tendency to want to check the door all the time, and to check if the door was locked, and he would get up and do all sorts of stuff. So I helped her design a solution where she essentially took over his behavior. So she had him come to class very early one morning with his mother, and they did about 45 minutes of checking doors around the school. And she started ordering him to check the door and make sure that he checked the door more. And this was kind of a welcome solution for her kind of sadistic tendencies to get revenge against the prickly kid. But it also brought some sense of humor and a solution into it. I'll give you another example of this. My daughter came home from kindergarten not long ago, and she looked kind of sad. And she said, Dad, the boys are mean to me. So I said to her, which boys specifically? I got 3 names, so I'll call them Jack, John, and James, just to use some English names. So I said, so Jack, John, and James are mean to you. She said, well, not James, but Jack and John? Yeah. How are they mean to you? They hit me. So I said, okay, how specifically do they hit you? She kind of looked at me and smiled. She said, well, we kind of play this game where they kind of chase me and then they kind of, hit my leg when we do this. And Dad, we're just playing. And that was it. Now, imagine how easily, as a parent, as a teacher, you could look at a facial expression or hear the words, kids are mean to me or they're hitting me, how easily I as an adult could have heard something very, very different and then projected that onto her experience and then started treating the other kids or the whole situation as if that projection was accurate. So this is a very, very useful tool in helping people connect their language to the sensory experiences that the language was originally referring to, and B, to help you as a communicator, as a parent, as a therapist, as a coach, whatever, to not hallucinate wildly, to not hear too much stuff that's not being said. Whenever I've gone to coaching courses, hypnosis courses, psychotherapy courses, philosophy meetups, groups where people often don't have a NLP background, I'm time and time again, I've been kind of stunned by how much wild mind reading there is, how much wild hallucinations, how much people project meaning onto the other person and then kind of treat the other person as if what you're projecting came from the person. I'll give you a classic example. If you look at psychotherapy, so client comes in and says, I have issues with my father, for example. Now, if you attempt to just understand the person, you'll activate images and sounds and feelings in your own mind-body system of problems with father, and then you might begin to project that stuff onto the client completely unconsciously as if that's what the client is referring to. But the feelings that you have now, the images, the sounds, that didn't come from the client. It has nothing to do with the client. It came from your internal experience. If you're working as a hypnotherapist or a coach or a psychotherapist, mastering something as simple as the verbal package, learning to ask which specifically for nouns, how specifically for verbs, will help you increase your results. Why? How? Well, as Eugene Gendlin discovered decades ago, one of the big denominators of whether what's called psychotherapy is useful or not is that the people who are successful have a tendency to be able to have a felt sense of the so-called problem while in the office, meaning that they can access a felt sense of what they think of as the problem. People who can't do that, have a tendency to flunk out of most kind of psychotherapy programs. This is how you become a good client, so to speak. Now, a lot of people have a lot of psychobabble going on. So, clients might start to just go off on tangents and tell stories, and they abstract and they have theories, and all these verbal utterances might be completely dissociated from any felt sense. They're just babbling in their head. And a lot of psychotherapy, unfortunately, is essentially a context where one person is just babbling and the other person pretends to care. Some of them might care. Many of them might not, But by using the verbal package, by asking the person, okay, which specifically for nouns, how specifically for verbs, you will then help people to connect the language back to concrete memory constructs, and then magically enough, fireworks often happen, magic often happens. People get in touch emotions come up. Now you have something to work with. So when I ask these questions, I don't that much in the therapy context, I don't that much ask them to get verbal answers. I ask them to evoke nonverbal responses. I use them to help people evoke states, the states and the context that their problem, in quotation marks, seems to be related to. Mastering that will help you increase your results. I promise. Now, the last part that I'm going to cover right now, where the verbal package can be very, very useful, is in silencing your own psychobabble, your own self-talk. If you have a busy mind with a lot of thinking that's going on here and there, and you're off and on tangents, it's linked to unhappiness. It'll make you less effective at what you're doing. It'll make you more miserable. So if you can slow that down and if you can reduce that, the consequences will be you living a life where more of the time you're in silence, more of the time you have peace of mind. So when you notice that your internal dialogue begins, do the verbal package on it. Ask how specifically for verbs, which specifically for nouns. That will have a tendency to check it. It will have a tendency to stop the rumination, the tendencies to go off on tangents. It'll connect language back to specific memory constructs. And it will silence your internal dialogue quite dramatically. So, as always, I hope this stuff was useful and inspiring. Um, if you if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you work with people, I really recommend getting some basic NLP skills. Some of the stuff taught in NLP is golden. There's some outdated stuff in most courses. There's some outdated stuff from the 70s that hasn't been outdated. There's some crappy claims many places about what you can achieve with modeling and stuff like that. But quality good information will make things better. So till next time, have a great time.